My name is Eleanor Vance. I am 60 years old, and what I am about to tell you will shatter every notion you have about family. 3 days ago, my own son, Ethan, and my daughter-in-law, Brooke, pushed my husband, Arthur, and me off a 90-foot cliff. As I lay there, broken and bleeding, I heard my husband's desperate, ragged whisper in my ear. "Eleanor, don't move. Play dead." But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what Arthur told me next, a monstrous truth our children had buried for 25 years, a secret that began with the death of our firstborn son. For 4 decades, Arthur and I had built what I believed was a perfect life. We woke up every morning in our cozy little house in a quiet New England town, where the scent of fresh coffee mingled with the crisp Vermont air. I was a teacher at the local elementary school, and I came home each afternoon with chalk dust on my fingers and stories of my students on my lips. Arthur had his woodworking shop in the barn, a place that smelled of cedar and sawdust, where he crafted the most beautiful furniture and small boats you've ever seen. His hands, though rough and calloused, could turn a simple block of maple into a work of art. We had 2 sons, Michael, our firstborn, and Ethan, 5 years his junior. Michael was the heart of our home, always laughing, always helping his father in the shop, always finding a way to shield me from any worry. Ethan was different, more reserved, quieter, but I loved him with the same fierce intensity. As a mother, you tell yourself you don't have favorites, and I truly believed I didn't. Sundays were for family. After church, we would gather around the solid oak table that Arthur had built with his own hands. Michael would excitedly talk about his plans to study aeronautical engineering, while Ethan would just pick at his food, his eyes downcast. Life was simple, but it was beautiful. It was ours. What you are about to hear is a story of the deepest betrayal a parent can endure. If you believe in karma and justice, and enjoy stories that expose the darkness that can hide in plain sight, please take a moment to hit the like button and consider subscribing to Aunt Millie's Tales. We'd also love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What would you have done? Now, let me take you back. In the evenings, Arthur and I would walk the path around Lake Champlain, talking about our dreams. We'd watch our grandchildren grow up. We'd travel to see the Pacific Ocean for the first time. We'd grow old and gray together in that very house. I never imagined those peaceful walks were just training for the one that was meant to kill me. On weekends, our home would fill with the boisterous energy of family. My sisters, Harriet and Irene, would come over with their husbands and kids. The house would echo with laughter. The smell of my apple pie would fill the air, and the men would tinker with something in the yard. Arthur was my perfect partner. After 40 years of marriage, he still brought me wildflowers he'd picked on his way home from the shop. He'd help me grade my students' papers, and I'd hold a piece of wood steady for him as he made a precise cut. We were a team, an unbreakable unit, or so I believed. At night, we'd sit on the porch swing, watching the fireflies and planning our future. We were happy, but perfect happiness, as I would learn in the most brutal way imaginable, often conceals the deepest, most terrifying secrets. When Michael turned 20, something in our family shifted. He started arguing with Ethan about things I couldn't comprehend. I'd hear them whispering in the hallway, their voices sharp and angry, only for them to fall silent the moment I entered the room. Arthur assured me it was just brotherly rivalry, that it would pass. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe my family was still perfect. Then came that night in October, exactly 25 years ago. Michael didn't come home for dinner. We waited until 11, then midnight, then 1 in the morning. Ethan was in his room, claiming he was studying. But I saw something flicker in his eyes whenever I asked about his brother, a coldness I couldn't place. Arthur went out to search for him with our neighbors. They combed every corner of our small town, every trail, every place Michael loved to go. At dawn, they found him. His body was at the bottom of a deep ravine in the woods. The police called it a tragic accident, said he must have slipped in the dark. I never questioned it. I couldn't bear to imagine any other possibility. The truth was a monster I wasn't ready to face. Michael's funeral was the darkest day of my life. I wore my only black dress, the same one I'd worn to my mother's funeral years before. Ethan was strangely composed for a young man who had just lost his only brother. While I sobbed until I had no tears left, he stood silently, his expression unreadable. Looking back now, knowing what I know, that calmness sends a shiver of pure ice down my spine. Arthur never left my side, holding me up when my legs threatened to give out, whispering words of comfort that I now realize must have tasted like poison in his mouth. After Michael's death, Ethan changed dramatically. He became more attentive, more loving, as if trying to compensate for some unspoken guilt. He helped me with chores, spent hours with his father in the shop, and always seemed to know when I was feeling down. I thought it was his way of coping with the grief, of trying to fill the enormous void Michael had left behind. How naive I was. He wasn't coping. He was crafting a mask, a perfect disguise to hide the monster that had taken my son's place. The years passed. The wound of losing Michael never fully healed, but we learned to live with the scar. Ethan married Brooke, a sweet-faced girl from the next town over. They seemed happy. They gave us 2 beautiful grandchildren, and for a while, I felt like life was offering us a second chance at happiness. Brooke called me Mom and would help me in the kitchen whenever they visited. Ethan had taken over the woodworking business, expanding it and giving every appearance of being a successful, responsible man. Everything seemed perfect again. But now, lying at the bottom of this gorge, with broken ribs and the metallic taste of blood filling my mouth, I understand it was all a meticulously constructed lie. The first cracks in their facade appeared 6 months ago when Arthur and I decided to update our will. We had saved our entire lives, and between the house, the land I inherited from my parents, and our savings, we had accumulated nearly $200,000 to leave to our son and grandchildren. It was Ethan who first suggested we see a lawyer. Mom, Dad, you're both 60 now. It's important to have everything in order, he told us, flashing a smile that now seems utterly sinister. Brooke nodded beside him, stroking my hand with the same fingers that would later push me towards my death. We love you so much, she cooed, and we just want to make sure you're protected. How foolish I was to mistake those words for love. Our lawyer, an old family friend named Albert, explained our options. We could set up a trust, divide the inheritance among the grandchildren, or create a traditional will. Ethan insisted that he and Brooke be named the sole heirs, arguing that they would manage the equitable distribution to the grandchildren themselves. Besides, he added, his tone laced with false concern, you're going to need us when you're older. It's better for us to have access to the resources to take care of you properly. Something in his voice made me uneasy, but Arthur, ever the trusting one, seemed convinced. My practical, kind-hearted husband accepted the proposal without much resistance. I had my doubts. I remembered how Michael had always talked about wanting to take care of us when we got old, how he had plans to build a small cottage for us on our property. But Michael was gone, and Ethan was all we had left. We signed the papers on a Tuesday afternoon. I remember Brooke was wearing a pretty green dress. She gave me a long hug after the signing. "Now we're officially a united family, forever," she whispered in my ear. Her words gave me a sudden, inexplicable chill. That night, as I made dinner, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just made a terrible, irreversible mistake. The following weeks were strange. Ethan and Brooke started visiting more often, but their visits felt different. They were no longer about spending time together as a family, they were about business. They always had suggestions about how we should renovate the house, what investments we should make, which life insurance policies we should buy. "Mom, you should really think about selling this big house and moving somewhere smaller," Brooke said one afternoon, her eyes scanning our furniture with a calculating gaze. "We could help you find a comfortable apartment in town." But I loved our house. Every corner held a memory. Every room told a story. The kitchen where I'd made thousands of meals. The workshop where Arthur created his masterpieces. The yard where my children and then my grandchildren had played. I couldn't imagine living anywhere else. When I told them this, I saw a flicker of raw irritation in Ethan's eyes that froze me to my core. "Mom, you're being irrational," he said, his tone sharper than any he'd ever used with me. "This house is too big for two people your age. If you fall down the stairs or something happens, we won't be able to get here in time." Brooke nodded vigorously. "Besides, the upkeep must cost a fortune. It would be much smarter to sell now while the market is high." Arthur, always the pragmatist, started to consider their arguments. But I felt a growing dread. There was something more behind their relentless pressure. One night, I asked Arthur if he didn't find Ethan's sudden obsession with our finances strange. "Eleanor, he just cares about us," he replied, but I saw a shadow of doubt in his eyes that he refused to acknowledge. Now I know Arthur already had his suspicions. He was already starting to connect dots I didn't even know existed. Things escalated when Ethan suggested we grant him power of attorney over our finances. "It's just a precaution," he explained, while Brooke made tea in our kitchen, as if she already owned the place. "If one of you gets sick, we can manage your affairs without any legal hitches." The way he said it, so calm and logical, almost convinced me. But his insistence gnawed at me. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, trying to understand the source of my deep unease. The next day, I called my sister, Harriet. She had always been shrewder than me, more skeptical of people's intentions. When I told her about Ethan's pressure, she was silent for a long moment. "Eleanor," she finally said, "doesn't it strike you as odd? Ethan's business is doing well, right? Why would he need so much control over your money?" Her words hit me like a splash of cold water. She was right. Ethan had never shown any signs of financial trouble. That afternoon, when Ethan came over for another talk about our future, I decided to confront him. "Son," I said, my voice trembling slightly, "why is it so important for you to control our finances? Your father and I are still perfectly capable." His reaction was immediate and terrifying. His face hardened, and for a split second, I saw a cold, calculating glint in his eyes that was utterly alien to me. "Mom, it's not about control," he snapped, his voice tight with anger. "It's about love, care, and family responsibility." But the words sounded like a threat. That night, after they left, Arthur and I had our first serious argument in years. He accused me of being paranoid. I insisted something was terribly wrong. "Arthur," I said, my hands shaking as we washed the dishes, "do you remember what Ethan was like before Michael died? He was different. There was something about him that scared me sometimes." Arthur stopped scrubbing the plate in his hands and looked at me. Truly looked at me. And in his eyes, I saw it. Recognition. Eleanor, he said, his voice barely a whisper. There are things about Michael's death that I never told you. My heart began to pound against my ribs. What things? I choked out. He sank heavily into a kitchen chair, the same chair where Michael used to do his homework. He buried his face in his hands, as if trying to wipe away 25 years of guilt. The night Michael died, he began, his voice cracking. Ethan wasn't studying in his room. I saw him leave the house around 8. I followed him. He'd been acting so strangely those last few weeks. More aggressive, resentful. He paused, looking down at his hands as if the horrible truth was etched into his skin. I saw them arguing by the ravine, Eleanor. I heard them screaming. My world started to spin. What were they arguing about? I whispered, a part of me desperate not to know. Arthur looked up, and I saw tears in his eyes, tears he had never even shed at our son's funeral. About the inheritance, Eleanor. And money. Michael had discovered that Ethan had been stealing from our savings account. The ground fell away beneath my feet. Why didn't you ever tell me? I cried, the betrayal cutting me twice as deep. Because when I got to the ravine, he said, his voice choked with sobs. It was too late. I saw Ethan standing over Michael's body. He was crying, repeating over and over. It was an accident. I just pushed him. I didn't mean for him to fall. He begged me to help him. He was my son, Eleanor, my only living son, and Michael. Michael was already gone. I couldn't bring one back by destroying the other. I convinced myself it was an accident. I buried the truth to save what was left of our family. I stumbled back, clutching the counter for support. Everything I had believed for a quarter of a century was a lie. And the stolen money? I asked, needing to know every last detail of the nightmare. He promised he'd pay it back, Arthur whispered. He never did. In fact, he kept stealing, small amounts I pretended not to notice, because confronting him meant admitting that I had covered up a murder. I became his accomplice, Eleanor. The horrifying reality crashed down on me. That's why he wants our money now, I murmured. It's not about caring for us. It's about finishing what he started. Arthur nodded gravely. And there's more. I've been doing some digging. His business is on the verge of bankruptcy. He owes over $100,000 to some very dangerous people. Does Brooke know? I asked, her sweet smile flashing in my mind. I'm sure she does, Arthur replied grimly. She's the one who asks the specific questions about our life insurance policies. They aren't asking questions, Eleanor. They're calculating how much our death is worth. The words sent a deathly chill through me. Our death. It was the first time I had allowed myself to think it. If he had killed his own brother for money, what would stop him from killing his parents? We have to go to the police, Arthur, I pleaded, but he shook his head, his face a mask of despair. With what evidence, Eleanor? My word against his? I'm an accomplice who's been silent for 25 years. They'll lock me up too. Just then, the phone rang. It was Ethan. Hi, Mom, he said, his voice dripping with false cheerfulness. Brooke and I were thinking, for your 40th anniversary next weekend, how about we take you on a special trip? A family hike in Acadia National Park. You've always wanted to go? I looked at Arthur, his face pale with the same terror I felt. We had just received an invitation to our own execution. The next few days were a living nightmare of feigned normality. We had to smile when Ethan and Brooke came over, nodding along as they excitedly described the mountain trail they had picked out for our celebration. Inside, every fiber of my being was screaming. I was looking into the eyes of my firstborn son's murderers, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that they were planning to do the same to us. Brooke arrived on Wednesday with a bag of groceries. "Eleanor, dear," she chirped, hugging me with the arms that would soon try to end my life. "I bought some snacks for our mountain adventure." She showed me cookies, fruit, and bottled water, all props for the perfect crime scene. "I also brought my new camera," she added, pulling out an expensive DSLR. "I want to capture every moment. These will be photos we'll treasure forever." The bitter irony made me want to be sick. The only photo she planned to take was of our broken bodies at the bottom of a cliff. Ethan arrived behind her, shouldering a new hiking backpack. "Dad," he said to Arthur, "I bought all the safety equipment, ropes, harnesses, a first aid kit." Every word was a cruel mockery. Safety equipment to orchestrate our murders. "Isn't it a bit dangerous for people our age?" I asked, desperately searching for an excuse to cancel. Brooke patted my cheek. "That's why we chose a very easy, safe trail," she assured me. "Besides, Ethan and I will be there to take care of you the whole time." Yes, they would be there to take care of us, right up to the moment they pushed us over the edge. That night, Arthur and I sat in our living room, trembling. "We can't go," I whispered. "If we don't," Arthur replied, his voice grave, "they'll find another way. A house fire, a robbery gone wrong. At least in the mountains, we know what they're going to try." His logic was terrifying, but sound. "Then what do we do?" I asked, my voice cracking. Arthur's face was grim with resolve. "We go," he said. "But we'll be prepared. I'm going to hide my cell phone and set it to record everything. If we survive, we'll have proof. And if we don't..." His voice broke. "At least someone will know the truth." He then pulled a sealed envelope from his desk. "I wrote a letter to your sister Harriet. It explains everything about Michael, everything we suspect Ethan is planning. It's hidden with our important documents. If we don't come back, she'll know where to look." That night, we held each other in bed, whispering words of love that felt like our last. "If something happens to me," Arthur said, his voice thick with emotion, "I want you to know these 40 years have been the best of my life. I love you more than anything." I cried silently, memorizing the feel of his arms around me. Saturday dawned bright and clear, a beautiful day for a murder. Ethan arrived early, whistling a cheerful tune that chilled my blood. "Morning, lovebirds," he called out. "Ready for your big adventure?" Brooke followed, looking radiant. During breakfast, which we could barely choke down, Ethan spread a map on the table. "It's a beautiful trail," he said, tracing a path with his finger. "It leads to a lookout with a spectacular view of the whole valley." His eyes gleamed with a demonic enthusiasm. The view would be the last thing we ever saw. As we packed the car, I saw Ethan checking his bag, the ropes, a small shovel, and a flare gun. "For safety," he said when he caught me looking. "In case we get lost." Of course, a distress signal fired after the accident to ensure our bodies would be found. The 2-hour drive to the mountains was an eternity. Brooke played cheerful music and sang along, the perfect daughter-in-law on a family outing. Arthur discreetly squeezed my hand, then activated the audio recorder on his phone, tucking it into his breast pocket. When we arrived at the trailhead, the place was breathtakingly beautiful, but to me, it was just the stage for our execution. "Ready for the adventure?" Ethan asked, and for the first time in 25 years, I saw the same cold glint in his eyes that I imagined Michael had seen in his final moments. The trail started easy, but after an hour, it grew steep and treacherous. Arthur and I were breathing heavily, our legs aching. They had chosen the route perfectly, intending to exhaust us and make us vulnerable. "We're almost at the lookout," Brooke called out, a blatant lie. They had no intention of reaching the real lookout. Their spot was much closer. Suddenly, Brooke pointed to a rocky outcrop off the main path. "Oh, look! That cliff must have an incredible view. Why don't we climb up there for some special photos?" My blood ran cold. This was it. The place they had chosen. The path was narrow and covered in loose rock, with a sheer 90-foot drop on one side. "I don't know," I said, trying to sound casual. "That looks a bit dangerous." But Ethan was already heading for the turnoff. "Come on, Mom," he coaxed. "It'll be worth it." "The photos from up there will be spectacular." Arthur squeezed my hand, a silent reminder that the phone was recording. We had to see this through. We had to get the evidence. The climb was terrifying. When we reached the top, the view was indeed spectacular, a panoramic vista of the mountains and the sea. A beautiful place to die. "Come over here for the photos," Brooke shouted, positioning herself near the edge. "I want the valley in the background." We approached slowly, each step a march toward our doom. I could see Ethan positioning himself behind us, like a predator circling its prey. "Perfect!" Brooke exclaimed, raising her camera. "Now, hug each other and smile." We held each other, perhaps for the last time, as the camera flashed. "Take one more," Ethan suggested, moving closer. "But step back a little, so we can get more of the landscape in the shot." One step back would put us right on the precipice. The time had come. We took the step. I could feel the empty space behind me. Brooke raised the camera again, but this time, the mask was gone. Her sweet smile was replaced by a cold, triumphant sneer. "Smile," she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "This is going to be your last photo." In that instant, Ethan lunged, his hands outstretched, aiming for the small of our backs, but Arthur was ready. In the last second, he spun, grabbing Ethan's wrist. "If we're going, you're coming with us!" he roared with a fury I'd never seen. For a moment, all four of us teetered on the edge in a macabre dance of death. Brooke screamed, grabbing at Ethan, but the momentum was too much. I felt the ground give way, and then we were falling, all four of us locked in a deadly embrace, the wind screaming in my ears as the jagged rocks below rushed up to meet us. The impact was a brutal, shattering explosion of pain. I heard the sickening crack of bones, felt the world go black for a second. The pain was indescribable, a white-hot agony that consumed my entire being. And then, through the fog, I heard Arthur's voice, a faint but clear command. "Eleanor, don't move!" Play dead I was alive. With a will I didn't know I possessed, I forced my body to go still, slowing my breathing until it was nearly undetectable. A few feet away, I could hear the pained moans of Ethan and Brooke. They had survived too, but they sounded worse off. "Brooke," I heard Ethan's strained voice. "Are you okay?" His concern for his wife, the architect of our murder, made my stomach churn. "I think my leg is broken," she groaned. "What about the old people?" The casual cruelty of her words confirmed everything. We were never family to them. We were just obstacles. I heard Ethan crawling toward us. My heart hammered against my ribs, so loud I was sure he could hear it. "They're dead," he announced after a moment that felt like an hour. "Both of them. Eyes are open, but they're not breathing." His lie filled me with a sliver of hope. If they believed we were dead, We might have a chance. Perfect, Brooke whispered, her voice laced with satisfaction. It worked, just like we planned. They spent the next few minutes discussing their next move. Their plan was to crawl to a place with cell service, call for help, and spin their story of the tragic accident. Remember the story, Ethan coached her. We were taking pictures. A rock came loose under Dad's feet. He pulled Mom down with him. We tried to save them, and we fell too. Their voices faded as they crawled away. When silence finally fell, Arthur whispered my name. Eleanor? Are you okay? Alive, I whispered back. We were both terribly injured. His leg was broken, and so was my arm. But we were alive. The phone was still in his pocket, still recording. We had them. Then, in the fading light at the bottom of that ravine, as we lay broken and bleeding, Arthur finally told me the full, unvarnished truth about the night Michael died. It wasn't just a push during an argument. Ethan had planned it. Michael had proof that Ethan was not only stealing from us, but was also involved in illegal gambling and owed a lot of money to dangerous people. He was going to tell us everything that night. Ethan pushed him to silence him. It was a cold-blooded murder. My husband had carried that secret for 25 years, a cancer eating away at his soul, all to protect the monster he thought was still his son. Just as he finished his confession, we heard voices in the distance. The rescue team. Ethan and Brooke had found help. The most crucial part of our plan was about to begin. Eleanor, Arthur whispered urgently. The phone has everything. Brooke's confession, Ethan's story. But if they find us alive now, they'll destroy the evidence. They'll finish the job right here. He was right. We had to continue the act. We heard Ethan's voice from above, a masterful performance of a grieving son. They're down here! My parents, please hurry! The rescuers rappelled down. One of them checked me first. I held my breath, focusing all my energy on appearing lifeless. This one has a faint pulse, he announced, referring to Arthur. The woman, I'm not sure. I need the medical team down here now. It was working. They would think I was closer to death, less of a threat. They stabilized us and airlifted us to the hospital. In the helicopter, I could hear Brooke's fake sobs and the rescuers comforting her. You were so brave, one of them said. If only they knew. At the hospital, the chaos was a blur of doctors, nurses, and medical jargon. I was rushed to the ER, fighting every instinct to open my eyes and scream for help. I had to wait for the right moment. A nurse, whose name tag read Sarah, was checking my vitals. Doctor, she said, her signs are strange. Her pulse is stronger than it should be. My heart leapt into my throat. They knew, but the doctor dismissed it. Trauma does strange things to the body. Soon after, the doctor told Ethan and Brooke they could come in to say their goodbyes. This was the most dangerous moment. I felt Ethan's hand on mine, and it took every ounce of my strength not to recoil. Mom, he whispered, his voice thick with fake emotion. If you can hear me, I want you to know that I love you. Then he leaned closer, his voice dropping to a venomous hiss meant only for me. I hope you learned your lesson. You never should have asked so many questions about our finances. Some truths are better left buried. Just like Michael. At that moment, I knew we had him. He had just confessed. And the nurse, Sarah, was standing right by the door. I saw her eyes widen in shock. She had heard it. After Ethan and Brooke left, Sarah approached my bed. Ma'am, she whispered, I know you can hear me. If you are in danger, you need to tell me somehow. Slowly, I moved my index finger once. Her eyes filled with understanding. They did this to you? She whispered. I moved my finger 3 times for yes. Sarah immediately went to get the head doctor and 2 police officers. When they entered my room, I slowly opened my eyes. My son, I rasped, my voice raw from disuse. My son and his wife. They pushed us. The rest was a whirlwind. I told Detective Johnson everything. Arthur, who had regained consciousness in the room next door, gave them his phone. The recording is crystal clear, the detective announced an hour later. We have explicit confessions, admissions of theft, and direct evidence of premeditated attempted murder. It's more than enough downstairs. In the waiting room, Ethan and Brooke were still playing the part of the devastated children, completely unaware that their world of lies was imploding. We watched through the window as police officers calmly approached them. Ethan Vance, Brooke Vance, the lead officer said. You are under arrest for the murder of Michael Vance and the attempted murder of Eleanor and Henry Vance. A moment of stunned silence, then a desperate scream from Ethan. That's impossible! We saw them die. They were dead. His involuntary confession echoing across the quiet hospital lobby. Their alliance crumbled in seconds, each one screaming accusations at the other. It was all his idea. I didn't want to do it. You were the one who suggested the cliff. The trial began 6 months later. When I took the stand, I looked directly at the stranger sitting where my son should have been. There was no remorse in his eyes, only cold, empty calculation. When I finished my testimony, I addressed him directly. I don't know who you are, I said, my voice clear and strong, but you are not my son. My son died 25 years ago, on the same night you murdered his brother. What has been living in his place is a monster that I unwittingly helped create. The jury found them both guilty on all counts. Life in prison, with no possibility of parole. Today, a year later, Arthur and I have begun the process of formally adopting our grandchildren. They are innocent, beautiful children who deserve to grow up knowing what real love is, not the twisted, manipulative performance they received from their parents. Every night, when I tuck them in, I tell them a story about their Uncle Michael, about his kindness, his laughter, his big dreams. The scars on our bodies are healing, but the ones on our hearts will remain forever. We lost one son to a monster's greed and another to the monster himself. But we survived, and now we will spend the rest of our lives making sure these children are surrounded by the one thing their parents never understood, the truth.